Hello, and thanks for stopping by. I'm currently in Devon, in southwestern England, which, in my opinion, and I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking this, is one of the most gorgeous parts of the UK. Devon's a very big place, and there's a lot to discover here. I happen to be in the northern part of the county, where, amongst other things, you can enjoy incredible beaches, such as this one at Westwood Hoe, and discover intriguing historical structures, like this old railway signal box at Instow, which dates from 1874, and, more soberingly, several concrete mock-ups of landing craft, which were built by the US Army in World War II to train troops for the Normandy landings. Today though, we're going to focus on the little twin towns of Lynton and Lynmouth, which are tucked away together on an extremely rugged stretch of the North Devon coastline. Lynton being located at the top of the cliff, and Lynmouth down by the sea. There have been a pair of isolated communities here for many centuries, and unsurprisingly, given its hidden nature, Lynmouth was once a popular base for smugglers. The two villages became better known to the wider public at the start of the 19th century, when the Napoleonic Wars put an abrupt end to continental holidays, thus meaning that those who were rich enough to afford such excursions had to look closer to home. Nowadays I guess you'd call it a staycation. Lynton and Lynmouth proved a popular choice, and with their beautiful architecture and stunning geographical location, the area quickly came to be nicknamed Little Switzerland. This boom in tourism, however, laid bare the one real problem with Lynton and Lynmouth, that being that travelling between the two settlements was brutally tough work. For many years, the only means of communication between the two villages was via this path, known as the Westerway, which winds along the cliff. Walking down from Lynton to Lynmouth isn't so bad, but in reverse, the walk up is pretty punishing. You'll need a very strong set of knees if you're going to attempt it. The Westerway had been used over the centuries to transport goods that had been brought in by sea, but this put a dreadful strain on the poor pack horses and donkeys employed for the purpose, and this problem was compounded further by the influx of tourists and the luggage they brought along with them. So steep is the hill, in fact, that the unfortunate animals who regularly worked the route suffered shorter lifespans. In December 1881, an individual using the pseudonym Pro Bono Publico wrote a letter to the Lynton and Lynmouth Recorder in which they suggested that the transport issue could be solved by building a water-powered funicular railway between the two towns. The identity of this person remains a mystery to this day, although it's likely they were inspired either by the Cliff Railway in Scarborough, which opened in 1875, or by similar systems used in Welsh slate mines. It wasn't until a few years later though, in 1885, that the idea began to gain real traction, if you'll pardon the pun, and this was driven by competition with a nearby town. You see, although still a popular destination, Lynton and Lynmouth were losing tourists to nearby Ilfracombe, and this was mainly because that resort had a pier which enabled paddle steamers from cities such as Bristol and Swansea to dock easily and unload large numbers of passengers. Lynmouth had no such facilities, meaning those wishing to visit had to be ferried to and from the shore on smaller rowing boats. It was suggested therefore that a pier should be constructed at Lynmouth along with a cliff railway which would bridge the gap with Lynton. If you've been to Lynmouth however, you'll know that, although there's a short esplanade, a longer pier for accommodating larger vessels doesn't exist. Permission to build a long pier was obtained in the 1890s, but the idea was quickly ditched. One possible reason for this is that in those days, paddle steamers were regarded by many to be nothing more than floating beer shops, and it's been speculated that certain powerful folk associated with Lynton and Lynmouth didn't really fancy the idea of entertaining large crowds of drunken city day trippers. The Cliff Railway was keenly embraced though, and its construction, all of which was carried out with manual labour, commenced in 1887, with an impressive cutting being forged in the limestone cliff. The project was mostly financed by Sir George Newnes, a wealthy publisher who's widely considered to be one of the founding fathers of so-called popular journalism, his most famous periodical being the Strand magazine, which would become noted for introducing the character of Sherlock Holmes. Although he lived in London, Newnes held Lynton and Lynmouth close to his heart, and was a regular visitor to the area. Consequently, he was well aware of the potential benefits such a railway would bring to the community. The engineer tasked with designing the line was George Corden Marks, who specialised in lifts and funicular railways, and was a self-confessed fan of Isambard Kingdom Brunel. Well, who isn't after all? Whilst construction duties were taken on by a local builder named Bob Jones, who can be seen standing on the left of this photo, which dates from 1890. Once the dizzying trench was complete, the 862-foot long tracks were bolted down, and 3 bridges, all of which remain in place today, were built across the line, along with 2 delightful stations at either end, both of which are now Grade 2 listed. Construction was swift, and the Lynton and Lynmouth Cliff Railway had its grand opening to the public on Easter Monday 1890, which was followed by a celebratory luncheon for 200 people at the nearby Valley of Rocks Hotel, who donated part of their land for the Lynton station. The Lynton and Lynmouth Cliff Railway has been in service ever since. Little was changed in its 130 plus year history, and it holds the accolade of being the world's highest and steepest water-powered funicular. The line is served by 2 cars, each of which can carry up to 40 people, and with their wooden benches, have a lovely old-fashioned tram-like feel. If you're feeling brave, you can even stand outside on the driver's platform, where you'll be treated to a breathtaking view. The manner in which the funicular works is simple yet ingenious, with the power coming entirely from water, piped in from the West Lynn River, which flows close by. Each car is equipped with a 700-gallon tank, and when they're docked, i.e. at a station, these tanks are filled with water, whilst the passengers board. Once both tanks are full, the system is in perfect balance. The drivers communicate with each other using a bell, and once ready, the driver on the lower car at Lynmouth discharges the water. This makes the opposite car, which is 500 feet higher up at Lynton, heavier, and hey presto, the magic of gravity causes it to descend. The cars are linked together by cables on a pulley-like system, and so as the upper car trundles down, it hauls the other one up. Given how perilously steep the Cliff Railway is, George Marks devoted extra special attention to the line's braking system, which is also water-powered. Essentially, the default setting for the brakes is that they're always clamped on, and are only released when the driver operates the wheel. If the wheel is released at any point, the car will automatically stop. In other words, it's a predecessor to the dead man's handle safety system, which was later employed on the London Underground and other railway networks. The Lynton and Lynmouth Railway is therefore incredibly safe, and has suffered no major accident in its many decades of service. Although sadly, in January 1909, there was one incident in which an employee named Thomas Andrews drowned after falling into one of the system's water tanks, after apparently suffering a head injury. Unsurprisingly, the line was also forced to close for a time in August 1952, when Lynmouth was hit by a catastrophic flood, which claimed the lives of 34 people. Today, that terrible disaster is commemorated in a special memorial hall, which you can visit in Lynmouth, and inside which you can view a model of the village as it appeared before the devastating event. When it first began operating, the Cliff Railway carried both passengers and freight, and continued to do so into the early 1950s. During those years, the line essentially had 3 stops, as this area, just below Lynton Station, which has handy road access, was classed as a halt, where goods could be transferred. In the early days, the railway even ferried motor cars, whose engines struggled to power up the hill. In short, the Lynton and Lynmouth Railway is a delight. The staff are both friendly and knowledgeable, the views are absolutely stunning, and dogs are welcome too. So if you're in the area, do be sure to pop by for a visit. In the meantime, here's a full ride all the way up from Lynmouth to Lynton, as seen from the driver's platform. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look at the history behind the Lynton and Lynmouth Cliff Railway, and would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you visited it too? If so, how did you find the ride? And did you attempt to walk up the Westaway whilst you were there? Please be sure to let me know below. As ever, thank you so much to all of you who support this channel with your kind words, likes and shares, all of which really do help my work here immensely. If you're feeling extra generous and would like to leave a tip, I now have a Ko-fi account which I'll link below. Any donations are of course very greatly appreciated, and they really do help me fund my videos. You can also leave a tip using YouTube's thanks button, which appears below as a heart symbol. If you haven't yet subscribed to Rob's London, it would be wonderful if you could please consider doing so, as this, along with ringing the bell icon, will ensure that you don't miss out whenever I publish a new video. Plus of course it would be lovely to have you along for our adventures. You may also be interested to know that I have an online store, Rob's Online Designs, where you can purchase an array of London themed mugs, featuring hand-drawn designs of buses, taxis, tube trains and so on. They make the perfect gift. I'll leave a link in the description. Anyway, for now, thanks again friends. Stay well and please be sure to stay tuned.